All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, with your favorite conservatarian contrarian, Jeff Charles. It's nice to see everybody again. I've got another excellent guest for you. We're going to talk about relationships. Again, it's interesting how I'm kind of talking more about this stuff to people, but we're going to have a really good conversation. But before I get into all of that, remember, you got to like, share, and subscribe. Please, that helps me out a lot. Just hit that like button, hit that share button, and if you haven't already subscribed, you need to get that done. Like, you get that checked off of your to-do list. Subscribe to A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics. Also, want to remind you that LibertyNation.com is a proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective. Check out LibertyNation.com for all of your conservatarian news, original articles and analysis, videos, podcasts, Liberty Nation Radio, and their signature TV program, The Conservative Five, all on LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback. Now then, we're going to talk, everybody's talking about relationships nowadays for some reason. They're talking about marriage, dating, all that stuff, about how dating is trash and yada, yada, yada. I've talked a little bit about my experience, and my unique experience and all that great stuff. But I have another guest for you today. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist, an all-around nice guy. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the illustrious Dovid Feldman. I almost messed up. I almost said David, but I'm going to say Dovid. I'm going to mess up again, though.
That's all right, Jeff. No problem. Get in line. A lot of people. It's an interesting name, that's for sure. So
yes, yeah, I dig it. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into everything?
Sure. Yeah. Well, my proudest accomplishment is that I'm a father of six. I'm a husband, and then I'm a father of six beautiful children. Thank God. Nice. And I spend my days now primarily doing family and marriage therapy. I'm a licensed therapist, and I have a passion. And my handle on Twitter is Building Great Marriages, and I have a passion for helping people, men and women, either married or thinking of marriage, developing the skills and the kind of the confidence to have a great, fantastic marriage. And it's something that I'm passionate about, and something that I honestly believe is within the grasp of every single person, which I feel like in today's day and age, as you probably have alluded to, is kind of a unique message, because people are so afraid of marriage today. And people do feel that they have no confidence in the institution of marriage for good reason. But I believe, and thank God my practice has shown this to be true, that having a great marriage is like a birthright, and anybody can do it. We just need to know how. And we need to develop our character to give us the strength to create this incredibly valuable, very, very pleasurable, very meaningful journey in our lives with a significant other.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think so many people are afraid of marriage? Because I've heard other people say that too.
Well, if you do some research into the statistics, it doesn't surprise me at all. I never disparage somebody for being afraid of marriage. There's a lot of downside if things go south, and that's for sure. And I'm not just talking about the most obvious things, which is the heartbreak and the sadness of losing that person who you thought was your soulmate. So that's one. There's an emotional aspect, which is very tragic when marriages fall apart. But there are real life consequences today, which have become exasperated and amplified. And, we don't have to go through all of it. I don't want to scare anybody, but,
right.
You're talking about a financial, it's probably the most devastating financial thing that could happen to a man or a woman is a divorce.
Yes.
And then there's the ramifications for children and things like that. So, in marriage, one of my rabbis once told me that marriage is like a beautiful thorn bush. Marriage is like a beautiful rose bush. It's very easy to get into and smell that beautiful rose, and it's very exciting and attractive. But when you want to pull away from the rose bush, that's when the problems start, because the thorns grip you and could tear and could really hurt. So, yeah, I don't blame people for being afraid. my mission is to teach people how to not be in that situation where their marriages dissolve. And I think everybody can do that. That's the good thing.
So would you say you focus more on, before the marriage, in like essentially equipping people with what they need to make sure that when they get into that rose bush, that they'll be okay? Or do you focus
stay
more
there.
on already in the rose bush?
Just like in almost any therapy or any medical situation, most people don't reach out until they're experiencing the pain of something happening, right? Like I know I won't go to the doctor in general unless I feel that something's wrong, and as a therapist, it's 90% of your patients are in that same boat. They're not going to come, clients, I should say, 90% of your clients aren't going to come to you unless they're feeling the pain of their relationship falling apart. So my mission, of course, on Twitter, and I have a blog, at Dovid Feldman, and I have a YouTube channel, small one, and I have a podcast. The goal is to help prepare people and help people who are interested in having a great marriage gain the skills and knowledge to do so. I wish that, just like a medical doctor, I wish more people would take my advice before they needed my advice.
Right. Right. Well, it's just like a lawyer. It's funny. I used to work for a company that had a service where, people could, if they were starting a business, they can have almost unlimited access to an attorney. And I used to tell people when I was selling it, now this isn't something that you just use when something goes wrong, because by then it's usually too late.
Yeah.
You're going to spend a lot of money. Like, this is more preventative. That you want to come with the questions beforehand so you can avoid those situations. So it sounds like the same principle.
Yeah.
Now, why did you decide to become a marriage and family therapist? Like, what made you even get into this field?
Yeah, good question. Well, my origin is that I actually, and I still have a technology company that I started 22 years ago already. And I was working a lot with computers and software development and code and sales and some machinery. And I've always considered myself very personable as an individual. And I just felt that as much as I appreciated writing in C and C++ and building these great enterprise systems for large companies, I just felt like I had enough of staring at a screen and only interfacing with software. And I wanted to touch people's heart. And so at a middle age, I went back to university and I got my degree, my master's, and then I got my license. And I've been doing it ever since. And I still have my other businesses that help pay the bills. I don't do marriage therapy for money, although I do charge money, but I don't do it for the money. I do it because I have a passion to help. I honestly, I may be one of these, idealists, but I honestly get so much joy from helping people who I know already love each other, bring that love to the surface and rekindle that connection that I can already see in almost all of the couples that I work with.
Gotcha. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said about that. Like when you're charging, but you're not necessarily doing it for the money. This is more of a passion. So I mean,
Yeah,
that I'm sure that comes out in the way you help people.
Well, it's interesting because I have clients from all over the world, and it's in today's day and age with working with people all over the world and the internet. You can't have if you're really passionate about what you do, the money has to come secondary, because I cannot charge a young couple in India the same price as I can charge a middle-aged couple that living in the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Right.
I just can't. I mean, I just can't. The price that my base price, for instance, may be very fitting or even cheap to somebody in Manhattan, but it would be 2 months worth of salary for somebody living in another country. So, and yet I don't turn people away as best as I can.
Right.
So, you have to have that open mind. If your goal is to make peace between people and help them, build a family or keep a family together, that has to be your priority.
Gotcha. So when you're talking to people, well, and I guess in your practice, you again talk to people after they're already married, but I mean, you're still in this sphere, so you still have seen a lot. What is the number one thing that you see people doing wrong when they're trying to find a husband or a wife?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, for sure. Well, we only have an hour, right?
We can go a little bit over. That's fine.
I'm just
Yeah.
joking. Look, this is what I want to say. Most people do things right. Most people are doing the right things, right? Because
Mm.
we all have an inherent and innate desire to love and to give and to make our partners happy. I mean, I have never met somebody who goes into relationship to ruin
Right.
somebody else's life, right? Or to be miserable. So 99%, I wouldn't say 99, let's just say 90% of what we do is right. It's that 10% that throws us off. And
Mm-hmm.
that's an important message because a lot of people, if they failed, quote unquote, failed in relationships, they get the sense that they're not lovable. They get the sense that they just aren't cut out for relationships. They get the sense that they're no good at sharing a life with somebody else. And all of that is not true. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, again, I'm not talking about somebody with this, I always qualify what I say just with a ridiculous qualifier that I'm not speaking about what I would
Right.
call a diagnosed borderline personality, not somebody who you got upset at and now are calling BPD or, oh, wow, he's a narcissist. No, not those people. I'm saying if somebody's a diagnosed narcissist or a borderline personality disorder or has other mental illnesses or has addictions, real addictions. So I'm not discussing those situations. Those are always outlying
Mm-hmm.
cases and they have to be dealt with individually. But for the most part, everybody has everybody wants very similar things. We want to make our partner happy. Men love making the women in their life happy.
Yeah.
Men do not get into relationships to cheat. we don't get into relationships to control
I
our
can't wait to
wives.
cheat on my future wife. Woo, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna spend $30,000 on a wedding just so the next day
Right.
you can cheat, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, and the same thing with women. There's this myth that goes around, like, I don't know if you're familiar with what the red pill community or whatever, there's these myths that
Yeah.
fly around that, women are just looking for the next best meal ticket or something like that. Horrible characterizations of both men and women all over the internet,
Yeah.
and it's so not true. It's just so not true. And many of these people that are saying that they may be, coaching gurus or working with a lot of wounded men. I'm a relationship therapist. I work with couples all the time. I'm licensed to, the information that I have is built on 70 years of this profession. And there are aspects of those messages which are true and need to be respected, but the twist is totally off. And therefore, what are some of, I didn't mean to derail you from that question. It's a great question. I think that the number one factor is most people don't understand what marriage is actually about. They just have a total misconception. And what I like to say, how I like to describe it is that, most people think that marriage is an extension of dating. So
Okay.
they meet a woman somewhere or they meet a man somewhere, and he's either really cute or he's, really cool, or she's just awesome. She really understands me, which are beautiful, beautiful things. Beautiful. That's good. It's good that you feel that way about your partner. And then they get into a relationship, and then it gets physical, and then it gets emotional, or it should be the other way around. It gets emotional, then it gets physical, whichever way it went. And they move in together or they live side by side and they develop this dating life, and they say, okay, well, we want to take our relationship to the next level, right? And then he gives her a ring,
Mhm.
and they get engaged for a year, and then they get married. And the misconception is that marriage is just going to be a continuation of what they've been doing, like almost like even like the higher level of what they've been doing.
Mm.
Total misconception. Marriage is a completely different thing. And dating if it's not done for the purpose of selecting whom you want to marry and go on this marriage journey with, you often find yourselves in very hot water. I can't tell you how many stories and couples and people I've met and just people who've known people, they dated for 5 years, and then within a year after they got engaged or a year after they married, the whole thing fell apart. How can it be? They were dating for 5 years. They moved in. They know each other's parents. They moved in together. They know everything. They go to the bathroom with the door open, which is really stupid. They know everything about each other, right? There's no secrets left. They've done everything that they're going to do in the bedroom. They met each other's friends. So what's the difference? Those people are usually the first, oftentimes they're the first. So it's just a piece of paper.
I was just about to say that. It's just a piece of paper, just a seal of deal.
How did this piece of paper ruin everything? It's just a piece of paper, right? It's because marriage is nothing like dating. It's nothing. When you shut the door on your relationship, when there's no exit, and you've shut the door on your way out, everything changes. When your perspective moves from how I feel today, tomorrow, next week, to a 40-year perspective, everything changes. I mean, compare that to ask any investor in the stock market. If he's looking at the market for a 2-month window, he's going to look very differently. He's going to choose very different stocks than if he's looking at a 30-year perspective.
Right.
And so everything changes when we tie the knot. And so when we date without having that in mind, we're just setting ourselves up for misery. That I would say is my number one, the number one slip up.
Okay.
And with the, do you mind if I just keep going a few minutes more about this?
No, yeah, you keep going, because the questions that I was going to ask was probably going to lead you more in that direction anyway. So go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't blame anybody. It's like we're not taught about what marriage actually is, right? If you watch any Hollywood movie, it's always the end of the movie. Always is until very recently, is they get married, right? I mean, all the action is what happens leading up to the marriage. How there was they fell in love, there was a misunderstanding, there was some controversy, there was whatever it was, they had challenges, they overcame it. She's taking off on an airplane and he's riding the horse, and he eventually tells her that he loves her, right? And then the next thing you know, she's not, her old groom is not on the altar, but this new guy is there, right? Starting with Mrs. Robinson from The Graduate, back in the 60s when Dustin Hoffman played in that movie, and that leaves us with this impression that marriage is nothing more than the next step in dating. And so that's what people grew up seeing, that's what they grew up thinking, and that's unfortunate.
So what is the difference then? I mean, what are they missing? I mean, obviously there's differences between dating and marriage, but I want to hear what you have to say. I mean, what do people not know is going to come over that hump once they do tie that knot?
Yeah. Okay. So I like to say that that secret ingredient that's not there in dating is the idea of commitment. Okay. Because, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but commitment is kind of the force that drives and propels your relationship. See, dating is all about feelings, evaluation in your mind, and kind of trial, right? It's like a trial. It's not so much about commitment, because the whole definition of dating is that if it doesn't work out, you can move on to somebody else. That is the definition of dating, right? Where dating is like, even though I'm just thinking about this as I speak, but even the word dating is like dates, right? It's not forever. It's about having dates, right? One date to the next. Marriage is about forever. So the character traits that are required to excel at commitment are very different than the character traits that are required to date. I
Okay.
can show up at every single date and make you feel fantastic.
Yeah.
I can dress a certain way. I can behave a certain way. I can treat you a certain way. I can connect with you a certain way. You're going to feel like you're on cloud nine, right? You're going to see when you get married. Is this your first marriage?
It will be my second.
Oh, your second. So then you already know that almost all of that goes right out the window when you're married.
Yeah.
And just goodbye, right? What are the character traits that are required for marriage? Patience, kindness, honesty, integrity, authenticity, communication, sacrifice, right? Acceptance, the ability to listen and hear, the ability to change, personal growth. These have nothing to do with dating.
Yeah, you don't need any of that for dating, really.
Exactly.
I mean, kindness, maybe. I mean, yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a totally different thing. And so dating is really to decide with whom you want to take this marriage journey with, recognizing that this marriage journey is going to be totally different. There's this analogy I always like to use. I've used it before. I have a lot of analogies, but this one I think is a good one. Imagine you wanted to climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
Right.
Okay. So you read up about what that's like, right? You study all the different things that you need to do. And you spend a lot of time going shopping for all this equipment and gear, right? You go to REI and you buy the best stuff and you talk to the salesman all about this tent is registered for minus 40 degrees and 90-mile-an-hour winds, and this sleeping bag will keep you warm. And then you hire the best Sherpa companies or whatever, the best guides, etc., and you get the best oxygen things, right? Does any of that actually help you, like prepare you or train you for actually climbing the mountain?
No.
No. No, that has nothing to do. I'm 54 and about 40 pounds overweight. Okay. I could do all of those things that I just said. I could literally do all those things. And I had an ACL tear a couple years ago. So my walking is nowhere near as strong as it used to be. Forget about climbing. But yet I could do all those things. But I wouldn't last 15 minutes climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Like
Right.
they'd helicopter me to base camp and I'd have all this stuff. But if going up the hill,
You're done. That's it.
Exactly. And that's how many people, myself included, all of us, I'm no different than anybody else. I was no specialer than anybody else. I made all the mistakes. So now I went back to school and helping other people say, hey, wait a second. There's like this whole thing going on that we need to prepare ourselves for.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. So I mean, because offline, you and I talked about the transition from dating to marriage. So what are some of the most common pitfalls would you say are there? Like let's say a couple's been dating for 6 months or a year or however long, and they say this maybe the ring isn't purchased yet, but they say, okay, yeah, we know we want to marry each other and we want to move towards that end goal, whenever it is. When that decision is made by both people, and again, they're not even engaged yet, but they know, okay, we want to get married. What are some of the most common pitfalls that you see from that moment on?
Right. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to turn the question a little bit and say, what are some of the most common success factors? Would that be okay if I answer?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that because I was struggling with how to ask that question. Should I focus on the pitfalls or should I focus on what you would recommend? So yeah, you take it wherever you want.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, I just did a Spaces about this the other day where I talk about dating to love or dating to live, or dating for love or dating for life.
Okay.
And what that is basically this concept that, To give it a little bit of a historical perspective, it's common knowledge for people who are obviously in the industry, and most regular average people will know that marriages in the old days were arranged, right?
Right.
And so love, the big question is, what does love got to do with it? That was always the approach that people took back in the day. As a matter of fact, your spouse could have been picked out for you before you even hit puberty, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was normal.
Yeah.
And then, families knew that this boy was going to marry this girl, and they just had to wait to them to get of age where they could make babies, and then the wedding took place. That would be a simple thing. Obviously, there was more complicated examples where kings would marry their daughters for the sake of politics and stuff like that. You're into politics. I'm sure you're very familiar with all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
And history, political science. So, there was a time period where love and emotion really wasn't part of the ingredients of getting married. At some point, the romantic period occurred where all of a sudden people says, "Hey, what about me?" I'm like, I count in this particular equation, and it wasn't just about marriage; it's about everything. It affected art and literature and everything. The whole world shifted with the advent of romanticism, science, and everything. Became more personal. And then what happened is it's kind of like, in my opinion, it's a little bit gone off the rails, right? So what happens is that and this I think is part of the malady that we're experiencing today, is dating is crap, dating is this and that, because we have fed ourselves like a gluttonous pig on this idea that love uber alles, that love is like the most important aspect of our relationship. And when we do that, we end up, like we've talked about a little bit earlier today in the podcast, we end up looking at things. Okay, what's the problem with putting such a high emphasis on love? I mean, isn't that what relationships are about? Isn't that what we all want? Isn't that important? I mean, what's a relationship without love? Right.
Right.
So, and that's true. That's true. That's true. And yet at the same time, focusing on love oftentimes comes with some perils, right? What are some of the perils of us focusing primarily on love? Okay, so the first peril is that love is a very selfish feeling. In the beginning of a relationship. I'm not talking 30 years down the road, but in the beginning of a relationship, love is about how you make me feel, right? Okay. And again, I'm all into feeling. I love feeling good, just like the next.
Yeah, everybody wants to feel good.
Everybody wants to feel good, right? I'm on that boat. But when that becomes the primary way through which we evaluate our partner and our relationship, so we're being selfish. Okay. Love is also an emotion, right? Which means that we're making decisions with our heart. Our heart isn't a really good decision maker. Our heart's a really good feeler, but it's not a really good decision maker, right? So many stories of people who have fallen in love with partners only to discover, even shortly afterwards, that there's some crucial life decisions that they did not see eye to eye on, including things as basic as, do you want to have kids?
Wow.
Yeah, it happens. You meet a girl, you meet a woman, and you guys have a great time. You're dancing together, you're hanging out, you're meeting each other's friends, you make love, you really get into each other. Maybe you've had a conversation about family a little bit here and there, but it might not be till 6 to 8 weeks or 2 months or 6 months later where you really have that conversation about kids. Now, at this point, you've already intertwined your lives, your heart, your body, your soul. And then because you've been leading with your heart, right? And then you find out that this person, having kids is really an afterthought. Oh yeah, she said at some point maybe earlier she mentioned that maybe she would have. She doesn't know how she feels about it right now, but yeah, she's not. But when it gets really serious, you find out that this person's not. Just has a philosophical bent against children. Maybe she believes that there's too many kids in the world already, and I mean, there's gonna be a million reasons, right? So that's just one small example of when we use our heart to make bad decisions. The heart's not really there to make decisions. Right.
Okay.
So another downside is that everything is very short term because emotions are short term.
Yes.
We're not looking long term. We're looking about how I feel right now. Right. So this is what living, dating for love, some of the pitfalls of dating for love, that it's self-centered. Is how do you make me feel? Right. And as soon as you stop making me feel this way, maybe I never really noticed your character or your worth. Right? Maybe I didn't really appreciate you for who you really are. Maybe I wasn't focused on what I was willing to sacrifice for you for the sake of us. Right? I am so enamored with the way you made me feel. Oh, he's such a great guy. Or I'll turn it around. She's such a beautiful woman. She's such a compassionate woman. She's just, every time I have a problem, she's always there. She helps me and with my stuff, and she I get so excited when I see her. She's so pretty. I love making love to her, right? These are all nice things, and these are good things. We should be paying attention to them. My point here isn't that we shouldn't be dating for love, but my point is that when we date for life, we get the best of both worlds. So what does dating for life look like? Mm-hmm. Dating for life looks like, I'm not so concerned about how much money he has in his bank account right now. I want to know whether he's a hard worker and a responsible person.
Okay.
Right? So when you marry a hard worker and a responsible person, you get both. You get a hard worker and a responsible person, and you get somebody who can most likely take care of you financially or contribute financially to the home, or is responsible financially, right? I don't only look at her and say, wow, her figure is so attractive. I also look at her and I say, wow, is that figure going to be the person who wants to take care of my children, our children? Mm-hmm. Right? Is she going to use that figure to take care of our children? Right. So not only do I get a woman with an attractive figure, but I get, when I'm thinking that way, I also get a woman who is going to be more focused on our long-term vision. And then, and maybe somebody's looking as, is my partner good in bed? Oh, I have such a great time in bed with this person, right? But I like to say, is your partner a good bed mate? Not just good in bed, right? Mm-hmm. Are you going to want to wake up with this person for 40 years next to you?
Yeah. So it's almost like when you're talking about dating for love versus dating for life. Dating for love looks at a lot of superficial. It sounds like, and again, like you said, there's nothing wrong with those things, but dating for life goes deeper. It takes that superficial and says the superficial is here, but we want to go under that and dig even deeper to what does this mean for our lives together.
Exactly.
And is what we want for our lives aligned? Are they aligned with one another?
Totally, absolutely. Interesting, fascinating life. My wife just came out with a book. It's called God Said What, and her and I had like a dual experience because we met actually in college, where we dated in like a very not traditional, like a very secular way. We met each other. I head over heels for her, and we did that whole dating process. Just like regular Americans do all the time, the kind that I'm talking about, dating for love. And then at some point, I kind of moved off to Israel, to Jerusalem, and became more observant Orthodox.
Okay.
And her book is really a story about her journey through this time, because I had encouraged her to come join me on this journey, and she just wrote a book about her whole experience. But one of the interesting things is that 7 years later, we dated again before we got married. So it was like a 7-year, it was on and off for 7 years, but a bunch of years later, we dated again, but we dated the traditional way, like the strict Orthodox way, where there was no touching and there was no physical intimacy, and we were focused on our marriage, what our marriage, our future was going to be like. And it's just such an interesting story. And you could see like the whole difference between the way we dated originally. It's the same people, right?
Oh yeah, same people, but you just dated. First you dated for love, and then you dated for life.
Yeah. It's
That's
really
interesting.
fascinating. So yeah, it's a really fascinating story. But yeah, it's future focused. And so I'm totally recognizing that. Yeah, you don't, for many people, arranged marriages is just not, it's not going to work. And I have no fantasy that should come back in the same way it was before. However, part of the message that I like to impart upon the younger generation is that there's such wisdom in our traditions about kind of, focusing on the long term. And like you said, even in the situation that you said, you want to give a ring, and you're about to do that, what considerations, we want to extend our vision beyond the beautiful woman that's standing in front of us. We want to take a look and start really considering long term. And we do that by focusing on character. Number one is always character, especially for a man looking at a woman. Number one is always character, because her character is going to define the energy in the home. That's just the bottom line.
That's true.
If she's kind, compassionate, patient, respectful, that's the kind of home you're going to have. And so it's very important for men to focus on character. And then, of course, for her, there's, of course, his character is very important as well. But there are other considerations like safety, security, responsibility, things like, his desire to provide, hardworking. There's we're different creatures, men and women. So we're looking for different things. So yeah, these are the kind of things you focus on, and you make your decisions based off of longer life decisions, life qualities, the qualities that lead to a good life, not just to a good love.
Okay, so I want to delve more into that, because I have some questions. But before I do, I just want to remind everybody to go ahead and head on over to libertynation.com when you're looking to see what's going on with the news of the day. You can sign up for the daily briefing, or they have the member zone that you can sign up for premium content. But the main reason that you should go over to libertynation.com is because you're going to get that cutting edge conservative news and analysis with none of the spin and all of the nuance. You'll get viewpoints from a traditional Republican type of person, or a conservatarian like myself, or straight out libertarian, or even if you're into anarcho-capitalism, we have that too. So definitely you're going to get a lot of different viewpoints. And the great thing about Liberty Nation is that when you read about the news there, you're not just going to get the normal surface level talking points. You're going to get some deep dive analysis about the issues of the day. You may not agree with all of it, but it's guaranteed to make you think. So definitely head on over to libertynation.com, where truth is making a comeback. So Dovid, you're talking about focusing on love versus focusing on dating for life. So my question is, why do so many of us focus on the love and we miss the life part? Because I've done it, and I think a lot of other people have done it. They're like, oh, she's so beautiful. Oh, he makes a lot of money, or whatever. But we don't tend to go deeper than that. Like, is this a good life partner for me, or a bed mate, and not just somebody who's good in bed? And why do we do that?
Well, I think our whole society in general is geared towards that. There's all different layers to answer that question, including very spiritual layers. When we can talk about like Jewish mysticism too, if you want. That's kind of an interesting topic as well. But our whole society is obviously geared today towards, immediate gratification. That's for sure. So we're immediately going to be focused on that which appeals to us in the present moment, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard for us to see, investors like Warren Buffett are dinosaur age. I can't even believe the number of people on Twitter that have the gall to even insult him, which I find astounding. I mean, talk about the height of disrespect. I mean, you may not agree with everything he says, whatever, but I mean, show some, the man is, you're a no matter how much money you've made in the stock market, you're a midget or an ant compared to the boot of his heel. I mean,
Yeah,
in
he
any
could
case.
buy you 10 times over with his pocket change.
Oh yeah. So, we're living in a unique generation where the younger people are expressing this immediacy in the world and a demand for immediacy, and that permeates everything, whether it's how much we look at our phones, to how we, like I said, invest in the market, to the spouses that we choose. But there is this, I feel like there's a spiritual war going on, and I feel like channels like yours, like you mentioned, telling the truth and stuff, we find ourselves oddly behind the eight ball. It's kind of like, how did that happen? Like when did that happen, that traditional conservative values have been thrown out the window? Like, I think most of us as conservatives are kind of scratching our head and saying, I didn't think that my opinions were the ones that I would be ashamed of or fearful of stating in public. Like, isn't the whole narrative that
it's crazy?
The whole narrative is that somehow we control everything and we have this privilege, and yet we're the ones who, it's such an odd feeling to feel like
we've lost that influence. I was just talking to my girlfriend about that. I mean, especially even with Christianity, the church has lost so much influence.
Oh yeah.
But they're still out there saying, "Oh, but the church influence." No, it doesn't influence as much.
Right?
Maybe some, but not as much.
Right.
Because if it did, things would look differently. I mean,
yeah. And as men,
like the values that you and I talk about, what we're talking about here, the traditional way, this is counterculture now.
Yeah.
This is counterculture.
Yeah, totally. But it's interesting that you see, that's the thing. There's, to me, and I think you expressed this just a second ago, there's an interesting twist to it. It's counterculture, but it's accused of being the dominant culture. That's the craziness. In the 60s, if you were a hippie, right? So everybody knew you were counterculture.
Right.
But you literally were counterculture, meaning you were, and they called you counterculture. But here what's happening is that we know that we're counterculture, but we're being accused of being the dominant culture and persecuting the other people. It's just, the whole thing is backwards. Incredible. Right?
Yeah.
It's like with men
it's
and
very
women,
clever on the part of the people who label it that way.
Yeah,
it is clever.
I think they feel that way. Like even with that, when you talk about the patriarchy, right? So it's like,
right.
I know on Twitter as a man, my voice is like, if I want to like call out men on their bad behavior, I have this huge microphone. Right? But if I want to say one tiny, I'm a patriarch, right? I would think that according to them, my anti-female dominant voice should be well accepted amongst the masses, right? And it's just very ironic. And I think that's what's going on a lot with marriage, that same kind of perspective. And I find it very fascinating. I've never seen a time where, and this is just my personal, and maybe you can share your story or people that you've heard this similar things from, but I've worked with a whole bunch of men recently who are marriage minded, that they openly admit that they want to support and take care of a woman. They're kind men, and they're looking for a wife. And and I'm working with them side by side on this, dating, and I work with people like that as well. And they're running into 28 to 32-year-old women who are still sitting on the fence whether or not they even want to get married at all.
Wow.
It's astounding to me, like the turnaround in what I'm seeing. Now, I'm not suggesting that there aren't women that want to get married.
Right.
I'm just astounded at how many women don't want to get married, or are unsure of marriage, or are saying that marriage is not necessarily, or even monogamy. Who's ever heard of a woman suggesting that, coming out as being anti-monogamous? I mean,
Yeah.
that's ludicrous, right? And but you're hearing that nowadays. So we're living this very interesting time where I think there's a spiritual war occurring, where the last breath of, um, anti-traditionalism is kind of rearing its head. And I think people like yourself, when you talk about your channel and this other channel, the other channel that you're referring to, are trying to fight that battle and bring people truth about situations in the world and real honest discussion. So I think that's a big part of why people are dating for love and fall into that trap. They're just, the concept of marriage has eluded them. And I know there's people that talk about, like, make marriage great again. I think Leela talks about that a little bit, and I think it's possible. That's the thing. Part of what I try to do is inspire people to see the beauty in marriage and the ability for everybody to have a great marriage.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and even with my story, I mean, actually, my story is actually very similar to Leela's. We were talking about that, but the first time around, I was, I was young and stupid, and honestly, I just didn't know a lot of this stuff.
Right.
I didn't have it, I didn't have it taught to me or talked about, and especially back then. I mean, what you're describing, the whole, backlash against the traditional way of doing things, that was in full swing. And to me, like the second time around, first off, I mean, I was bitter. I was like, I'm never gonna get married again. Like, I'm never doing this again. This is ridiculous. I mean, it's crap. I don't, And I always said, if I do, then hopefully I won't have to, date a bunch, but to find the right one, because I don't want to deal with all that drama, especially since I always hear about how dating is trash, like you said. And it's funny because when I met Keisha, I mean, we started talking and started growing closer. It's almost like it came out of nowhere. And it's just, to me, it's like, but the things I was thinking about as 41-year-old Jeff was a lot different from what I was thinking about when I was 25-year-old Jeff.
Right.
Like now I was thinking, I want somebody who can be a partner to me, somebody whose vision and purpose aligns with what I'm doing. Somebody who's, and I had a lot of other stuff that I wanted too, but it was more deeper. It wasn't just the superficial, oh, they get me, or they make me laugh, or they laugh at my jokes, or whatever. It was always a lot deeper than that. Like, the things that give me joy, give her joy. And when we started to realize that, it's just started to make sense. And that phrase, we make sense together. That continues to come up, not just, and that sounds very cerebral, like, this is rational. Okay, we've got these certain points, we make sense. No, we, like, it wasn't just something that we thought about, it was something that we just felt on a very deep level.
Yeah.
And so it's like, in a sense, without really knowing it, I mean, we're dating for life and not just for love, because we talk about the future, we talk about what we want to accomplish together, and what God has for us, and who we are in Christ. And and it's a lot different this time around. And I wish it's like one of those things where I wish I knew then what I know now.
Right.
And it's interesting because a lot of the stuff I wasn't even conscious of it when we were talking, but I was kind of, watching, the manosphere and the red pill community and all that stuff. So I kind of understood, where people were coming from. But when it just became so apparent, it was like, why would I want anybody else? So I'm blessed. I didn't have to, do a bunch of dating and stuff like that.
Good for you.
It's just, and it's funny because even my followers will say, wait a minute, weren't you just anti-marriage like 5 minutes ago? I'm like, yes, but I don't know what happened to me. I don't know what this woman did to me. What did she do to me?
But that's a really, first of all, congratulations on finding somebody who you feel comfortable with sharing the rest of your life with. That's amazing. Good for you. And that's the thing, when you talk about the red pill community and stuff, it's a man has, it says, you said you're a Christian. So, when Adam lost his rib, it's the Jewish Talmud teaches that a man seeks a woman like a man seeks his most precious lost object, because Adam lost his rib. And so he's running around the world looking for that rib that he feels that lack inside of him. It's very natural for a man to pursue and to seek out his helpmate. And so, with some of the messages of the red pill community, or even MGTOW, or some of these other movements, I totally respect in many ways what their grievances are. I never disparage people for whatever they've experienced in life, and people who've done analysis on what happens during divorce and child care and all that stuff. I get it. Like, I'm not here to argue any of that. The only thing that I work on is helping men who've chosen to divert from that path, or never knew about that path, hopefully, but that want to build a great marriage, and that I think is doable. That I think is very possible for everybody when we focus on, my blog at my website just has article after article after article about all these different scenarios that come up. I love going into the depths of pain and hell in my articles to teach people. And you know what to do? You know what I do? I normalize it, because it's like no one talks about this. I think that it's normal to talk about this, but people oftentimes claim that it's like, it's intense, and it is intense because marriage is intense.
Yeah.
Our feelings as a man of being disrespected, or fearing of losing everything, or anger issues, or feeling disappointed, or feeling trapped, or not feeling up to the task. These are all things that we experience. I'm sure you felt that way in your first marriage, right? And we have to deal with that. We have to deal with them. We have to know, how do I dig myself out of this emotional hole that I feel like I'm in right now, without tearing down the entire edifice? We need to know. We need the tools, because that, like I said, that's what marriage is. Marriage is, I think Jordan Peterson talks about this. This is like, you're gonna feel like you're crunched into this tiny ball, and yet you're not going to let go. You're not going to say, I'm done. You're not going to say, I'm out. You have to have the ability to return from the abyss over and over and over again. And that is the most exciting journey of a lifetime. It's the most amazing thing, because the second you overcome that hurdle, I even have an article called "Thank You for Driving Me Crazy." And it's the story of a man who, his wife was, he he didn't know which way was up and which way was down, right? And the reality is that God created woman as our helpmate. And everybody's helpmate looks different. Some of them are warm, sweet, and compassionate.
Right.
Some of them are nasty and not necessarily nice. Some of them are incredibly emotional and can fly off the handle. God gave you exactly what you need. And her job is part of her job is to help create a man from a boy. Even, and I'm talking about 25, 27, 30, 40, 54. That's her job till 120 years old. And we need to know, I hope I'm not being like overly dramatic or anything in this podcast.
No, you're not.
We need to know that it's like, this is the journey. When the heat is on and the temperature's really hot, that's it. You're in the game, right? How do you know a basketball player that's in the game? You ever see those videos of Michael Jordan when he's like literally sweating from every pore in his head?
Yeah.
He shaved his head or whatever was going on up there, and he's in the game. That's the highlight of the game. That's it. That's not when he quits. That's showing you. And that's the same thing with us. Oftentimes we look at marriage and say, well, I'm getting married to be happy. No, you're getting married because, first of all, you're getting married because you have a vision of where you want to go with your life with this other person. And whether it's children, which for many people it is, family building, which for many people it is, that's the first thing. But the other thing that's happening is that we're taking the most incredible, I like to say it like this, the most incredible individual journey of your life with your partner right at your side. Marriage is an individual journey, even though she's right there with you. But it's about your growth. And that's the difference between this and dating. We started off this conversation about it. Dating has nothing to do with this. You wouldn't survive this with dating. As a matter of fact, I always tell people who are dating that come to me with problems, and I very quickly, not in every circumstance, but in many circumstances, I listen to their problems and I say, listen, what's happening here is that you're having marriage level problems. because you're living together for who knows how many years
Mm-hmm.
without the framework of marriage. So I'm sad to say that there's a good chance you're not going to make it. I don't say this. Obviously, I try to help them through their
Right,
issues,
right.
but I let them know that there's nothing wrong with them having these issues. This is normal, but it's normal within the context of a marriage.
Not a
And then,
dating relationship.
yeah. And when you have these problems, that's why I don't like dating for so long, because you end up having marriage level problems, but you don't have the framework of marriage to hold you together to solve the problem. And so we need to know, and I'm just, I'm imparting this to you because you're about to take your second journey into marriage, that, letting go is like almost, not always, okay, but almost always, it almost always can be overcome. Not always, but almost always can be overcome. And that's when you're in the game. I'm saying this over and over and over again, but I'm just passionate about it. I don't know. What do you think about what I'm saying?
It's just, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think it's a difference in mindset, really. I mean, if you're in the mindset of dating, you're not going to be able to handle marriage level problems. And I was going to ask, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the situations where maybe they are married, but they still have a dating mindset.
Oh, of course.
And it's what's tragic about it is that people do this and they don't even know they're doing it.
Yes.
I didn't, a lot of other people didn't.
I didn't. I didn't.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. And sometimes you have to learn the hard way, but you're right, because when you do have the right mindset, it is exciting. You are in the game. You are, embracing the process. And it is you as an individual doing it together with the individual by your side.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different dynamic. It's hard for me to articulate in the way that I would like to, but that's really what I'm looking forward to. And that's really what she and I are focused on. And I just wish more people understood it. I wish it didn't take so long for me to understand it. And, I think people always want to talk about, and this is an age-old problem, really. I mean, they want to talk about they focus on the Disney aspect of the relationship. Everything is beautiful. Everything is wonderful. Nothing ever goes wrong.
Right.
Or, whatever, or they live happily ever after, but they don't really tell you why they did. It's just, we just focus on such superficial stuff. And it's almost like a con job, because you're basically conning these young people into thinking that you're going to meet your Prince Charming and he's going to sweep you off your feet. Y'all are going to get married and it's just going to be beautiful. And then we wonder why we have like a 50% divorce rate. I mean, I'm sure there's more to it, but I think that that's a very significant factor. They don't talk about the importance of making sure that you're choosing the right person. That's one thing I wanted to ask you about too. I mean, choosing the right person. I mean, you can't choose the right person if you're basing it off of a dating mindset versus or dating for love mindset versus a dating for life mindset. And it's just, it's a con job. People are conned into thinking that things are going to be a certain way. Yeah, maybe we'll have just a few problems, but it ain't going to be that bad, right?
Right. Because you could have a great dating experience, right? You could be getting along perfectly when it comes to dating. We love each other so much. What could go wrong? I love the way you say it in terms of a con job. There was a rabbi that once taught my wife, and he told her when she was studying about dating, he explained to her, he says, when you're dating somebody, spend less time looking at what you like about them and spend more time looking at what you don't like about them. Because those are the things that you're going to be living with for the rest of your life. So he said, you have to decide whether you can handle the things that you don't like about him. Whether you're up to that challenge. Don't get enamored with the good looks and the money or the career or the kindness or the flowers. He says you're going to find a lot of men that have all that. But what irks you? What gets under your skin about this person? Are you willing to live, the rest of your life with that? And for most people, the answer is yes. Most people, the answer is yes. We're not talking about anybody who's a monster or anything like that.
She is a serial killer. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. And at first I had some issues with that, but I think, I can live with that as long as she doesn't get caught. What do I care?
She's a really good kisser. I mean, that's the most important thing.
Right? Exactly. I don't care if she kills people and dismembers their body. What's that got to do with me?
That's right. As long as she doesn't kill you, right?
Right, exactly. As long as she doesn't kill me, I'm good.
As long as she keeps her profession out of the house, we're good. Yeah. So this is an important thing, and that's really where the test of love and the excitement of marriage and I like to say that your marriage partner is your soulmate. Okay, so what does that mean, your soulmate? Right?
I was going to ask you, because you mentioned soulmates earlier. I was going to ask you, do you believe in soulmates?
Yes, of course. Okay. And what is a soulmate? According to Jewish mysticism, a soulmate is that there's a single soul up in heaven that God splits in half. And he says, okay, I'm going to take this half of the soul and put it into this female body. And I'm going to take this half of the soul and I'm going to put it into a male body. And I'm going to make them born roughly around the same time. And their souls will attract to each other in this world. And they're going to have totally different personalities. They're going to come from totally different backgrounds. Obviously, in this example, they're totally different genders. So the differences between men and women.
Right.
They're going to have different histories. They may even speak different languages. They may have different cultures and everything. And the challenge of life is to reunite with your soulmate. So how do we do that? How do we do that? People say, I don't want to give up anything in marriage. Hello, that's the whole point.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because what we're trying to do is we're taking two halves of the same soul that don't fit together like two perfect puzzle pieces. The opposite. They don't fit together at all. God has enclosed these halves of the soul in two totally different physical manifestations.
Right.
And so the trick is, how are we going to, we're going to be bumping elbows. We're going to be bumping foreheads. Our personalities are going to be annoying to each other, where our bodies might not fit perfectly. There's going to be tons of language challenges, history challenges, communication style. Every possible conceivable physical difference is going to show up between you and your wife. As much as you think you know her now, just wait. Every difference that you could possibly imagine will show up. And the goal of marriage is to, in spite of those differences, create that infinite unity between you and her. And that is just the most fantastic process. It's the most elevating, meaningful, purposeful, loving. And that's where true love comes. True love comes when it says, okay, I know this little finger of mine is getting in the way, so I'm just going to shave it down a little bit so that it doesn't bother you, even though it means so much to me. My sense of humor, that I've grown up and entertained hundreds of friends, maybe thousands of friends, in such a part of who I am as a person, doesn't rest well with you. It hurts your feelings. My sarcasm hurts your feelings. I love my sarcasm, right? That's part of that's my self-identity. But guess what? For us, I'm going to learn how to put a little leash on that. And so this is what marriage is. And you become such a different, elevated person who understands what sacrifice is and loyalty is and giving and patience and forgiveness and all these great things that make us more godlike. And then after all that whole process, and your wife has driven you crazy for all these years, saying, "Well, change this. This is." You turn to her afterwards, and you look at yourself in the mirror, and you say to yourself, "Wow, I am such a different person. I am so much better than I was." And you say, "Thank you for what you've done for me." Mm-hmm. It wasn't easy, but thank you. And it's such a beautiful way of connecting with what marriage is all about.
And I think you touched on something there. I mean, when you have that more of a life mindset versus love, that enables the other person to help you become a better person. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that somebody who has a dating mindset and they're dating, but they're dating just to date, or maybe they might think about marriage in the future, but they're dating to date right now. That other person isn't really going to make you better, or at least not much better. And you're not going to make them much better. But when you do have that dedicated marriage mindset, now that person is more of a partner to you. And yeah, they are going to make you better. They're going to challenge you. Sometimes they'll make you better by challenging you, by driving you crazy. And then they might make you better in other ways. I mean,
Yes.
even with Keisha, like we made each other better in certain ways. And we're excited to see how that's even going to develop in the future, because it is a developmental process. So, I mean, so when you're looking at, whatever relationship you're in, that's something you need to be thinking about. I mean, can I help make this person a better person? Can they do this with me? And, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Beautiful
Again,
thought.
stuff that we don't think about.
You will. You won't have a choice. Nobody has a choice. It's part of
eventually you're going to learn it.
It's like sink or swim. Like, that's basically it. Like, you'll get there. It's just how you get there is going to be up to you. I can't tell you how many people, like, I was in this one group, and this woman was talking about her relationship with her husband. And, I don't typically hear this so much from women. And she was just saying that, in the beginning of her marriage, things were really difficult. She said she was a difficult marriage. Okay. And then she said, and then one day I just decided to shift my entire mindset. And now I'm happy as a peach. Like, now we are the best couple, and I'm so happy. And I just said to her, that's so interesting, because it's like, so often we think about, well, this person has to change, and this person has to be different, and my partner has to do it too. Just a funny story. I know we're a little late, but I have this couples program that I do, and it's really unique, because what I do is, I'm a marriage therapist. So I don't really subscribe to the idea of putting the husband and wife in the same room and then them fighting it out in front of me, and then me kind of playing referee. I don't do that. That's not my style at all. I always say, like, why would I put a hungry lion and an angry tiger in the same room and expect anything positive to come from that? So what I do, which is different, is that I have individual sessions for him and for her. And after 3 sessions, I bring them together and we talk about something that we've discussed privately first. And then we do another couple sessions, and then we bring them back together as a group. And it works out just fantastic. It's so successful. And it's like, I kind of move into the relationship. So it's like an emotional menage a trois type thing, where I'm like totally part of, I always say, have you guys ever had a threesome before? And they're like, no. And I was like, well, we're going to have one now. Don't worry. It's not going to be physical, but now there's 3 of us in this marriage,
Yeah.
And, but what I found was really interesting, this one couple that I was working with, is that, each person in the marriage is responsible for setting up their own appointments with me. So she sets up her first appointment. And it's supposed to be that I'm supposed to meet with each one once a week. And we're supposed to work on the same things, and there's going to be changes and shifts in the relationship. So she sets up her appointment the first week, and we go through the first module. Then her husband, he couldn't make the first week, so it was no problem. Then she goes to the second week, and she does her second module with me. And there's homework, and there's all these different assignments I give her, and there's all these different learnings. And once again, for some crazy reason, there was some sickness in his family, something, he couldn't make it. And then she sets up on the third week, and he still hadn't set up his one appointment. And I asked her on the third week, how are things going? She says, oh, things are so much better.
Really?
This is just the greatest marriage program ever. I'm thinking to myself, it's so crazy. I mean, she set up 3 appointments. I do a lot. I cover a lot in these three sessions.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not just sitting there listening to her complain about her husband. There's a lot of lessons and homework and assignments and work that she's doing. And she's telling me after the third week, she's like, gosh, this is great. We've never been in a better place. We're getting along so well. This is great. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe we should just not have him show up at all. Maybe just leave
it ain't broke,
Yeah, exactly. And that's the power. Like you said, it's like an individual. It's a mindset. It's a whole mindset. This woman was able to make huge changes, And I'm not even sure whether she knew whether her husband had set up. She may have been under the mindset that he had been going to sessions. I didn't ask her, I didn't want to rock the boat or anything. But I
Yeah.
just thought it was like so interesting that here's this woman who's just like, thinking that never it's been so great and the marriage has never been better and she's feeling so close to him. The guy never even talked to me one time.
Wow.
Just
That's
goes to
great.
show that that how the power of one person can change everything.
It can, and maybe she even changed some of the stuff that he was doing wrong just by being a different person. I mean,
Totally,
that could,
totally,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I feel like we went so deep and like we barely scratched the surface. Yeah, I say this to a lot of people, but it's still like with you, like we're gonna have more of these conversations.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah, because there's just so much here. I mean, you brought up stuff that now I have to have you back on. Like you're talking about Jewish mysticism. I didn't realize that you were an Orthodox Jew, so I always have questions about that too,
Oh,
just
for sure.
for my own. So yeah, I mean, we got to do this again. So maybe we
Sounds
can set
great.
something up.
It's been a real
But
pleasure. I mean, you're a great host, and it's been very fascinating discussing with you and hearing your story too.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure, sure. So I have a unique name, David, and then my last name is Feldman, Dovid Feldman, and that's my Twitter handle. At Dovid Feldman. That's where most of the action is. I have a great blog and website, so it's davidfeldman.com. Not too much competition for that name. So I have davidfeldman.com, and on my blog, on my website, there's tons of articles. There's free video master classes on communication and listening and boundary setting and all different really cool things. I have a fantastic podcast right there on my blog as well. I do a lot of Twitter spaces, so you can also go there right on my website as well. There's a menu that says Twitter spaces. You can hear all of my own. I think I have 30 of them or 20 of them already recorded. If you follow me on Twitter, you can join in on real-time conversations, which are really fascinating. I have a marriage program. So, there you can set up a clarity call. It's like a free 20-minute call that we can chat for a little bit if you want to talk to me about something. And perhaps, that may lead to sessions, just private sessions between you and me, or you can even, if you want your spouse to be a part of it, you can, have a couples therapy as well. I do pre-dating, or pre-marriage work. I do a lot of interventions. I work with everything in marriage. It could be anything from infidelity to just general, tune-ups to, just emotional estrangement, any types of topics. And I just want to share that I know that if you're married, you could have a great marriage. So don't give up. There's always hope, and things can turn around. You'd be amazed.
Awesome, great. Well, I'll be looking forward to having more of these conversations with you, brother.
Good. Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.